Forgotten victims of Lake Shetek, Minnesota history. Bullet first, then the club not in battle, but after surrender. Mrs. Eastlake fell a victim, not just of the Sioux uprising, but of its brutal treachery. Shot after she sought peace, then savagely beaten and left to die. Lake Shetek, August 1862, was a place of unimaginable horror. This isn't just history, it's a descent into the darkest heart of human conflict. Are you ready to face the unvarnished truth of what happened here? To understand the brutal dawn at Lake Shetek, we must rewind a few years to 1858. William J. Dooley, with his wife and 5 children, chose this seemingly tranquil lakeside to build a life. He would later recount tales of fierce fighting during the Sioux attack, claiming injury and a daring escape. Yet even then, whispers of doubt followed Dooley's narrative. Some survivors like Everett and Hatch openly contradicted his valor, labeling him a coward who fled at the first sign of danger. Regardless of the controversy that dogged his name, Dooley inadvertently carved a place for himself in history. His accounts, however contested, remain a vital, if debated, record of the tragedy. Then in November 1861 came John Eastlake, known to the local Sioux as Friend Big Head. Seeking a fresh start for his wife and 5 children, Eastlake settled at the old French trading post, a site southeast of Ireland's and northeast of Dooley's. He was starting anew, patching the old post, working to build a cabin. Little did he know, his family's fate was already entwined with the looming storm. The death of Eastlake and the harrowing survival of his family would become central to the Lake Shetek narrative, forever etching their name in local memory. But the stage for this tragedy wasn't set solely by individual lives. Broader forces were at play. By 1860, the American Civil War was raging, draining resources and attention. Treaties had been signed just years prior, promising annuities, payments to the Sioux in exchange for land. However, the government, strained by war costs, became delinquent in these payments. This wasn't merely an oversight to the Sioux, it was a profound betrayal. Decades of broken promises, encroachment on their lands, and now withheld payments. The tensions were reaching a breaking point. This government negligence became a critical spark, igniting the tinderbox of Sioux resentment and desperation. Amidst this volatile mix of settlers and simmering Sioux grievances, a figure named Rhodes arrived at Lake Shetek just days before the explosion. Some whispered he was evading the Civil War draft, others that he was a solitary trapper. Regardless of his motives for being there, Rhodes unexpectedly acted when the attack began. Unlike some who fled, Rhodes, armed with a superior rifle, reportedly stopped running long enough to shoot one of the attackers, attempting to disable a settler wagon. This single act, confirmed by multiple accounts, suggests a complex character, perhaps a draft dodger, perhaps a trapper, but undeniably someone capable of decisive action in a crisis. Rhodes' intervention, however brief, offered a crucial window for some settlers to escape, triggering alarms at Dutch Charlie's settlement and providing precious moments for others to flee. The unfolding massacre. These were the individuals, and these were the pressures converging at Lake Shetek in August 1862. A community built on fragile peace, on government promises now broken, on individual courage and, as some accounts suggest, individual failings. The stage was set for the brutal encounter, an encounter that would expose both the heroes and the cowards and leave an indelible scar on the history of Minnesota. August 20th, 1860, the morning stillness at Lake Shetek, shattered with the terrifying war cries of Sioux warriors. A wave of attackers, faces painted for war, burst from the surrounding woodlands, descending upon the scattered homesteads with brutal speed. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre unleashed. The peaceful facade of the lakeside settlement dissolved instantly into pure, unadulterated chaos. Women screamed, children cried, and the scattered gunfire from settler men was swallowed by the overwhelming roar of the assault. Confusion and terror became the only constants as families were ripped apart in their dooryards, their fields, their very homes. Panic seized many of the men, survival instinct overriding any semblance of organized defense. They bolted, some disappearing into the trees without firing a shot, leaving behind not just their homes, but their wives, their children to face the onslaught alone. Those few brave souls who rallied to fight found themselves desperately outgunned, outnumbered, making a futile stand against a storm of violence. Houses became traps, fields turned crimson, and the idyllic lake reflected a scene of unspeakable brutality. Lake Shetek was no longer a haven but a hunting ground. Slaughter Slough, a marshy depression in the landscape, became the epicenter of the settlers' desperate final stand. It was here that John Eastlick, armed and determined, positioned himself, trying to shield his fleeing family. The air crackled with gunfire, the thick smell of gunpowder mingling with the earthy scent of the slough. Amidst the chaos, a shot rang out, distinct and true from Eastlick's rifle. Later accounts, notably from Mrs. Cock, who was nearby, insist it was this shot that fell Lean Bear, a Sioux warrior of note. "I saw it." She'd recount years later, her voice still trembling. "Eastlick stood firm, protecting us. Lean Bear charged, and Eastlick, he didn't hesitate, he fired. And Lean Bear went down." Whether it was Eastlick's bullet or one from Dooley or Ireland, as they later claimed, the shot that brought down Lean Bear proved a costly victory. The gunfire pinpointed Eastlick's location. Enraged warriors swarmed him, outnumbered, fighting back to buy precious seconds for others. John Eastlick fell at Slaughter Slough, becoming one of the first defenders to perish. Even in the headlong rush for survival, flickers of unexpected courage ignited Rhodes. The enigmatic newcomer was among those trying to escape the slough, but then something extraordinary happened. Witnesses recounted seeing Rhodes in mid-flight suddenly stop. He dropped to one knee, raised his prized rifle, a weapon far superior to most in the settlement, and took aim his target. A Sioux warrior attempting to detach the horses from a wagon laden with women and children, a wagon desperately needed for escape. Coolly, deliberately, Rhodes fired. The warrior fell. The single act of defiance, a brief pause in his own flight for life, created a crucial window. The delay Rhodes caused, however momentary, allowed some terrified settlers to scramble free, to gain precious ground in their desperate retreat. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, Rhodes vanished, melting into the landscape, continuing his own perilous journey to Charlie's, carrying the alarm that might just save others. Slaughter Slough became a tableau of horror and despair. Realizing the fight was lost, witnessing the carnage around her, and driven by a mother's desperate instinct, Mrs. Eastlick made the agonizing decision to surrender. She stepped forward, hands raised, a gesture of supplication in a landscape of savagery. "We surrender, spare the children." She may have cried out, her voice lost in the din, but surrender offered no guarantee of mercy. As the captured settlers, a ragged line of women and children, were being forced away from the slough, a chilling betrayal unfolded. Pawn, an Indian known to the settlers, one who had even been considered friendly, suddenly turned executioner. Without warning, he raised his rifle, aimed it at Mrs. Eastlick's back, and fired. The bullet ripped through her. She collapsed, the muddy ground soaking up her blood. It wasn't enough for Pawn. In a final brutal act of assumed finality, he moved to the fallen woman and with the heavy butt of his gun stock began pounding at her head again and again, until he was satisfied she was dead. He left her there, broken and still on the edge of the slough. But Lovina Eastlick, in a twist of fate that defied all reason, was not dead, unbeknownst to her attacker. The soft, waterlogged earth of Slaughter Slough had yielded under her body, cushioning the blows, absorbing the killing force. She lay amongst the dead and dying, but life incredibly stubbornly remained. Even surrender offered no protection for the innocent. Mrs. Eastlick's young sons, Freddie and Giles, had been spared the initial slaughter, only to face a crueler fate. Having given themselves up with their mother, they were now defenseless captives, yet with a casual cruelty that defied comprehension. Sometime shortly after the surrender and before the forced march back to the lake even commenced, both Freddie and Giles were murdered. Their small bodies, lifeless and broken, became just more casualties in the indiscriminate violence. Their brother Frank suffered a similar near-fatal fate. Shot alongside his mother during the chaotic surrender, he too was left for dead, but like his mother, Frank possessed an almost supernatural resilience. He too, against all odds, survived the bullet and the abandonment. Days later, near death, but still clinging to life, Frank was discovered by Joe Lefram Bosch. Bosch, encountering the boy, abandoned in the aftermath, took him westward away from the carnage. into a future shrouded in uncertainty. A future history has, for the most part, lost track of the Dooley family's experience, mirrored the broader tragedy, etched with its own unique horrors. William J. Dooley, his claims of bravery ringing hollow against the accounts of others, made his escape early nursing a claimed wrist wound, while his family was left behind. His wife and daughters Belle and Frances were taken prisoner. Their eldest son, 15-year-old William J. wasn't so lucky. He perished in the brutal opening moments of the attack, another young life extinguished in the indiscriminate violence. Belle's fate was perhaps even more agonizing. Dragged back towards Lake Shetek with the other captives, she was brutally murdered sometime after their return to the ravaged settlement near the Ireland homestead. Mrs. Cox, an eyewitness to so much horror, would forever carry the image of young Belle's final moments. Frances, the remaining Dooley daughter, vanished into captivity, her ultimate destiny fading into historical conjecture. Did she die in the Dakota Territories or somehow find her way back? History offers no definitive answer. Amidst the widespread devastation, individual stories of suffering piled upon suffering. Everett, who had fought beside Dooley in the early settlement days, was wounded, adding to the tally of settler casualties. And for the captured women, Mrs. Dooley and Mrs. Cox, the physical violence of the attack was compounded by the sexual violence that followed. Under the cover of darkness, in the chaotic aftermath of the massacre, the supposed friendly Indian Pan became their tormentor. He subjected both women to a brutal sexual assault, an act of depravity that Lavra Dooley would later recount in graphic detail, ensuring that this layer of horror, too, would become part of the grim legacy of Lake Shetek. He came in the night Laura Dooley's account might begin, her voice heavy with inherited trauma. "Pan, the one we thought was our friend. He changed that day. He hurt them. He hurt my mother and Mrs. Cox in ways that words can barely touch." The sun set on August 20th, 1862, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked ground of Lake Shetek. The day had begun in peace and ended in utter annihilation. Heroism and cowardice walked hand in hand, with unimaginable brutality and heartbreaking loss. The stories of Lake Shetek are not comfortable ones. They are stories of survival against impossible odds, of families torn apart, and of a community shattered beyond recognition. And they are stories that demand to be told and to be heard in all their raw, unsettling truth. But even amidst such devastation, life impossibly stubbornly persisted. Lavina Eastlick, left for dead at Slaughter Slough, was not truly gone against all odds. She regained consciousness, wounded, battered, and collapsed. She began a torturous crawl away from the carnage. Bewildered and disoriented, she stumbled through the landscape until miraculously she recognized the familiar outline of the Ireland homestead. The Indians were gone. Seeking refuge and desperate for help, she found her way to the Ireland house, and from there began the long, agonizing journey towards new home. Along the way, fate intervened. She encountered Spot, the mail carrier, or Van Meter as Ireland recalled him. Spot, a figure of chance encounter in this tragedy, offered assistance, and together they connected with Mrs. Ward Hurd and, incredibly, Mrs. Eastlick's sons Merton and young Johnny, who had been taken in by the Ireland family. On September 4th, they reached the relative safety of New Ulm, survivors emerging from the ashes of Lake Shetek. Lavina Eastlick's resilience went beyond mere survival. In 1863, seeking respite and support, she traveled with her children to Ohio, seeking the comfort of family. During that harsh winter, she did something remarkable. She documented their harrowing ordeal. From the sales of her book, a testament to her courage and the public's morbid fascination, she funded her return to Minnesota the following year. By 1866, she was purchasing land near Mankato, rebuilding a life from fragments. Neighbors, witnessing her indomitable spirit, rallied to help constructing a small frame house for her and her children. Merton, resourceful like his mother, learned carpentry, his skills and earnings, further solidifying the family's fragile recovery. In 1867, he even built an addition to their home, a kitchen, bedrooms, a buttery brick-by-brick rebuilding, not just a house, But a future yet life after Lake Shetek remains shadowed by loss and heartbreak. In 1870, Lavina married Solomon Peatbone, seeking perhaps companionship and security. But within months, Peatbone vanished without a trace. After a trip to Ohio left a widow once more, Lavina gave birth to a daughter the following summer, alone but not defeated. Her youngest son, Johnny, barely 10 years old, stepped up, becoming a young man out of necessity, helping his mother care for the infant and manage the household. Neighbors continued to offer support, a testament to the enduring bonds forged in the crucible of shared tragedy. Lavina Eastlick, a woman marked by unimaginable suffering, lived a long life, finally passing away on October 9, 1933, a living embodiment of resilience in the face of historical trauma, her story etched in her own words and lived out through decades of perseverance, serves as a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. William J. Dooley's narrative took a different and arguably more controversial path in the aftermath. Returning to Lake Shetek in October 1863, a year after the massacre, Dooley joined Captain Starkey and 40 mounted rangers. Their mission: to locate and properly bury the remains of the settlers who had perished at Slaughter Slough. Dooley, now styling himself as Chief of Scouts, with the rank of Captain, a claim some contemporaries might have raised an eyebrow at, participated in the grim task of exhuming and reinterring the bodies. Accounts vary slightly, Starkey recalling 7 coffins, Dooley claiming 6 regardless of the exact number. The scene was undeniably somber, a chaplain of Mr. Ames presiding over the reburial. It was during this return to Lake Shetek that Dooley claimed to have found the remains of his daughter, Belle, down by the Des Moines River. A claim that adds another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of survivor testimonies. Dooley, throughout his life, maintained his version of events at Lake Shetek, including the claim of killing Lean Bear. However, this claim was consistently challenged by others, most vehemently by Mrs. Cock, who stated unequivocally, Mrs. Cock says, "I was in the slough, and Eastlick was between his wife and myself. When he shot Lean Bear, I know that shot killed him." The question of who fired the fatal shot at Lean Bear remains unanswered, a microcosm of the larger struggle to definitively reconstruct the chaotic events of that day. Despite the shadows of doubt and conflicting accounts that followed him, William J. Dooley moved on, eventually relocating to Calvert County, Alabama, where he became a postmaster and a justice of the peace, a life rebuilt far from the ghosts of Lake Shetek, yet forever intertwined with its dark history. Merton Eastlick, the boy who carried his younger brother to safety amidst the chaos of Slaughter Slough, grew into a young man, defined by resilience and responsibility. He mastered carpentry, a skill that provided not just a livelihood, but a means to rebuild literally and figuratively his family's life. He married Marianne Alexander, and they began their own family. Tragedy, however, remained a constant companion. In 1875, at just 24 years old, Merton succumbed to a pulmonary ailment. His mother, Lavina, recorded her devastating grief upon receiving the news: "Martin is dying. Oh, what a shock. I did not faint, but I thought I should die. And then I seemed to realize the truth, that Martin was dying." Martin, the boy hero of Lake Shetek, was laid to rest, mourned as the hero of Lake Chautauqua. His early death adding another layer of sorrow to the already narrative. The accounts of Lake Shetek, pieced together years later, are a tapestry woven with threads of heroism, cowardice, suffering, and cruelly contradiction. Everett Hatch and Mrs. Cock all openly accused Dooley of cowardice, their testimonies sharply contrasting with Dooley's self-portrayal as a brave fighter. Even seemingly simple facts, like the number of bodies buried, became points of contention, with Dooley and Ireland offering differing counts. These discrepancies aren't mere historical footnotes. They highlight the inherent challenges of reconstructing traumatic events from fragmented memories, biased perspectives, and the fog of war. The truth of Lake Shetek isn't a single, unified narrative, but a collection of fractured recollections, each offering a partial and sometimes conflicting glimpse into that horrific day. Today, the site of the Eastlick homestead, the epicenter of so much tragedy, is part of the Jessup and Evans Farm The old Captain Aldrich place, the physical landscape has been transformed by time and agriculture, yet the echoes of August 20th, 1860 to linger. The graves of the victims, initially marked by simple fences built by Merton, Eastlick, and Dooley, then later by a more permanent fence erected by Captain Aldrich, stand as silent witnesses to the events that unfolded. Lake Shetek is more than just an event. It's a profound human tragedy, a story of courage and cowardice, loss and resilience. Stories like these deserve to be told and heard. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories to explore untold chapters of history and let the lessons of the past illuminate the present.